During the February of 2014, after an agonizingly long wait at a furniture store, my parents took me to a local GameStop. All day, and the weeks leading up to it, the only thing on my mind was finally getting my hands on the new Donkey Kong Country game, Tropical Freeze. Ever since its reveal nearly a year before, I was checking WiiUDaily.com on the system's internet browser for any new info, and I'd be seated for any Game Explained trailer analysis. I would even draw some of my own box art. As a big fan of the previous game, Returns, and 2D platformers in general, knowing that there'd be a new Retro Studios Donkey Kong Country game with a beautiful art style, unique level designs, and music composed by the same man who created so many iconic songs in the old games was enough to keep my mind busy till release. And when it finally did release, I played it non-stop. And I couldn't bring myself to slow down until I traversed every stage, battled every boss, snatched every collectible, won every gold medal for speedruns, and beat the entire game again in hard mode. It was everything I wanted it to be and more, and it was my obsession for at least a month or two. Thinking back to my initial playthrough, I recall myself loving the first world, Lost Mangroves, but it was Windmill Hills, the introduction to the subsequent Autumn Heights, that just put the dumbest smile on my face. The beautifully animated intro cutscene, combined with the shimmering guitars welcoming you into this pastoral mountainous landscape, sealed the deal of my opinion of Tropical Freeze. It's very good. And this game has so many intoxicating moments like that. Diving into the water and abyss and being enveloped by marine life. Getting shot directly into a tornado in frantic fields. Getting thrown out of your minecart into a logboat in Sawmill Thrill. The giant squid from the previous game jump-scaring you in Irate 8. Leaping off of this platform, ziplining atop the clouds and ringing the bells and wingding, realizing how the main levels of Juicy Jungle tell the story of the enemies harvesting fruit to make popsicles for the boss. I can go on and on about the levels in this game. They're some of the best I've ever played in any platformer, 2D or 3D, and as displayed in Windmill Hills, David Wise's soundtrack fully delivered. While I understand that the limitations of the Super Nintendo's sound chip was part of what made his previous efforts so captivating, it's so nice to hear an unshackled Donkey Kong Country soundtrack with such varied instrumentation. One tune that particularly stuck with me was Harvest Hazards. I remember listening to this song on loop on the last day of the school year 11 years ago, and I think it's still my favorite track from this game. Other favorites include Alpine Incline, Busted Bayou, Horntop Hop, Seashore War, and Alpine Incline again. Yeah, I should mention, a shocking amount of these levels have 2 or even 3 or even 4 or 5 songs, whether they're variations of the first one or entirely different. This gives the stages a cinematic, episodic quality. It's phenomenal. David Wise and the team really put their all into the soundtrack, and the genius is omnipresent during all 7 worlds. Maybe I was being a bit picky, but I was a little disappointed that this game didn't get the universal praise and attention I was expecting. Most of the YouTubers I liked at the time, like CJS001 and AntDude, gave high remarks for sure, and I saw some publications giving the game 8s and even some 9s. But there was this one review that I think about to this day because, well, it's just kind of funny. And that was the review by GameSpot, where they gave Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze the horrible, despicable rating of 6 out of 10. Honestly, not terrible without any of the context, but the majority of the video was spent on the boring, unimaginative level design and the bland visuals. And it's his opinion, of course, but he also says all this stuff while this all plays in the background. And reviews like this kind of contributed to the strange feeling I had about this game's popularity. There just wasn't much of it. Does it have to do with the fact that Retro Studios made this game instead of continuing their acclaimed Metroid Prime series? Yeah. Does this have to do with the platform it was on? Of course. I understood all that. Nevertheless, when Shovel Knight, another fantastic 2D platformer, released later that year and got all the hype it most definitely deserved, I was still annoyed that Tropical Freeze flew under the radar like that. However, it wasn't until 4 years later that the game truly was in the spotlight for the very first time. What was the reason? It did end up selling quite well though, and I can't really complain about the people who bought this game again because, anyway, this was when praise for the game really exploded, with a lot of reviews and people calling it one of the greatest 2D platformers of all time. Not gonna lie, it was quite validating for the game I would sing the praises for was finally being talked about in this magnitude. But enough about talking about what other people think about the game. I want to get into why I'm making this video in the first place. For the 5 to 6 years after the original Wii U release, I would boot up the game now and then, replaying random levels and improving speedrun times, but I eventually stopped. For about 3 to 4 years, I didn't open the case at all. That was until 2020, when the COVID pandemic began. By the time autumn arrived, I was living in a dorm room at my college by myself. Trying to remember things that happened that semester is difficult. What I do remember were the silent hallways outside my room, getting lunch with friends every now and then, and having a lot of online evening classes. It was definitely a tough time, and getting wrapped up in nostalgic feelings was what made me start to play some old games I loved. At some point when I visited home, I brought back my Wii U and several games to go with it. Funnily enough, instead of playing actual exclusives, I mostly just played virtual console games like Majora's Mask, Super Mario World, and the original Donkey Kong games. As the semester continued and the restlessness persisted, I decided to pop in that game I adored over 6 years ago, and I had fun, playing all my favorite levels, remembering just how well the gameplay flows, and soaking in the beautiful music. It was nice to be back. However, it was when I landed in Windmill Hills, looking at those expansive fields and rocky mountains, where I had an idea. For context, one interest that really bubbled up throughout the year was ambience. Paying attention to how the sounds outside mixed to form a whole, listening to and identifying birds, even getting into ambient music. This interest was a great way to find pockets of comfort and stillness in a time when I definitely needed it. So, as I studied the landscape, I wondered what Tropical Freeze would sound like if I shut the music off. I went to the settings, set the number to 0, and... the feeling this gave me is hard to describe, but I'll try. It felt like my past and present interests collided to form something new. It felt like looking at my nostalgia at a different angle. It felt like my essence was projected onto the TV screen. Turning off the music in Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze turned this energetic, dazzling experience into a serene, meditative, globe-trotting adventure. So much work was put into the sound effects for this game. Sounds that you'll never hear and notice when playing normally. The wind, the different ways a platform creaks, the squeals from the animals. The environments already felt like living, breathing worlds, but this went beyond that. I ended up exploring all the levels with only the ambience, letting my curiosity take the reins. It was not only the sounds that fascinated me, but how they danced with the gorgeous visuals. I started looking out in the distance of these levels and just think, what would it feel like if I just sat right there? It was through this experience of slowing down that I actually discovered some hidden details that I never would have found otherwise. The first was in Cannon Canyon, where touching these explosives wakes this penguin up from their nap. The second is all the background items in Abyss Abyss, where ground pounding in certain spots actually causes some special animations. I never would have thought that this game, that I already considered to be my favorite of all time, would get even better at a different stage in my life. When I first obtained Tropical Freeze from that GameStop, no matter how much I enjoyed it, it still felt like a video game. Now, I was finally a part of that world I loved so dearly back then. It was a reminder to embrace what I love, how beautiful Earth can be, how beautiful art can be, and it was a reminder to breathe.